Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
To my fellow citizens, America is back.
President Donald Trump delivered his first address of his second term to a joint session of Congress.
And our country will be woke no longer.
And Michigan's freshman U.S. Senator Elissa Slotkin delivered the Democratic response.
America wants change, but there's a responsible way to make change and a reckless way. And we can make that change without forgetting who we are as a country and as a democracy.
Today, two perspectives from Michigan, from different sides of the aisle, on what we heard last night. We'll begin with Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Hello there.
Hello there.
So, Congresswoman, give us your brief response to the president's speech.
Well, I will say that it was a 100-minute long speech, the longest in modern history, and 2 minutes on the economy. Quite frankly, I think it was a night of theater. I personally am disturbed about the amount of division that you saw in the chamber and what it means. I have been to a significant number of State of the Unions or joint addresses over my lifetime, and the one last night probably for me was one of the worst I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Why is that?
It was a campaign rally speech. There was a lot of talk about the divisive issues. Everybody contributed somewhat to the tension that was in the chamber. But I think of these as historical moments where we come together, all three branches of government, and would like to try to see moments of unity. And quite frankly, there was not a moment of unity last night.
What was the feeling in the chamber during the speech as you saw your fellow Democrats holding signs, one was escorted out? Was this constructive?
I think it's a very complicated time. I think we are a representative government, but let's talk about, there were a lot of things said last night that did not have basic facts. And, we're a complicated country and we're a representative government. That means both sides have people of different perspectives and different opinions. On the Democratic side, there are a lot of people that are very frustrated. They have constituents that are very frustrated. They want to see people stand up, to fight back. What is the best way to do that? I think everybody's struggling with the best way that you showed that this is not business as usual. I attended, I did not have a sign, and I actually got tears when I saw the little TJ who wanted to be a law enforcement officer and has lived with a brain tumor for 6 years, when he hugged the director of the Secret Service. It was an emotional moment, but it was so tense last night that the humanness of all of us was not there. So it's a very complicated time. Let's just be honest about that.
It is complicated. And within the Democratic Party, as you note, some Democrats have decided to compromise to try to find bipartisanship. You've talked somewhat about that since November of 24. I'm curious, after last night's speech, what's your interest in working across the aisle, in working with this president?
So I want to say this. I'm never going to not want to work across the aisle. I want to work with everybody. And I will do that when I can. And when it's going to help the people of the 6th district that elected me, the state of Michigan, and my country. But when something is going to be done that is going to hurt the people of my district, the people of Michigan and this country, I'm going to fight like hell. And there are a lot of things that have been happening lately. I care deeply about our veterans hospitals. The John Dingell VA Detroit Hospital has been understaffed, had serious problems. They brought in new administration. They're trying to staff back up, and then you go and fire people. That's not addressing veterans care. And I've heard from so many of the scientists and the researchers whose programs are just frozen. When you can't have an advisory committee meet, which has to meet to determine what should be in the flu shot next fall, that's endangering all of our public health. We do have to stand up. We have to raise the stories. We have to educate people, and we can't sit silently by and say that that's okay.
Did you hear a president at all willing to work with Democrats?
Last night was a campaign rally. I think it was theater. He talked about issues, but I didn't really see his reaching out. I mean, the biggest problem we face in the next 2 weeks, it's less than 2 weeks, it's 10 days, is that the funding for the government will run out at midnight on Friday night, March 14th. What are we going to do? How is that going to get resolved? It's a very complicated time. And I think that there are Republican members of Congress that want to work with Democratic members, but the climate right now is such that that's not happening. Republicans right now, though, control the House, the Senate, and the White House. They control all three branches. So they've got to deliver the votes, but it's a very, very, very complicated time.
Well, let's talk about Michigan's economy, particularly in light of this tariff decision. I can only imagine the amount of calls that you are getting from business leaders. Trump, in his speech, said he talked to the autos. Do you have any idea of what those conversations were like and what he is hearing from people on the ground in our state?
I have heard rumors, but I do not have facts. And clearly there was a call. The president told you that last night. I think you have had reports from the Secretary of Commerce about things that are being discussed on an auto carve-out. And there's even discussion, I'm told, that there might be a delay on auto tariffs while that exemption is being discussed. But I'm only hearing rumors. I have not had someone say to me, this is what's going to happen. This is what. So I'm hearing what you all are hearing.
So after roughly 100 minutes of the president's speech, we had the Democratic response. What do you make of this decision to have Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin deliver the Democratic response?
I think it was an excellent idea. And I want to tell you, I think she did a very good job. First of all, she went to Wyandotte, which is my downrivers. I don't represent Wyandotte now, did for a long time, and still have many friends there. But it is the downrivers where I spend a lot of time. This is my community. It's my home, where I said to you all that Hillary Clinton wasn't going to win in 2016 because I was listening to what people were saying down there. And it's also the same place that had me all telling you in different words, Kamala hasn't won Michigan yet. I think she's a tough, straight person. She talked about the issues. She put it what was at stake. Her closing about the importance of people being engaged and picking issues. You two have heard me talk enough. I could have said those words. I say it often. And I think she did a very good, concise job in 10 minutes of framing the issues that are at stake.
She made a point, in fact, of saying after how long that speech just went, I'm going to be quick. Congresswoman, she really did, as you know, she took a centrist tone. And we are seeing in polling from independents and from some Republican town halls that approval of Trump and some of these policies is slipping. You have plenty of folks across the aisle that you speak with. Are Republicans privately aware of the mood right now and are just not publicly speaking out?
I love my district because my district reflects America. And there are certain parts of my district that are angry. They want to see us fighting back. Mm-hmm. They don't think Democrats are being tough enough. There are certain parts of my district that are centrist and are where Elissa is. And if you go in a union hall right now, they are not saying tariffs are bad. They may be a little worried about what it's going to do to their consumer costs, but they see somebody fighting for their jobs. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen people fighting to bring their jobs back home. As Democrats, we have yet to figure out. I mean, Joe Biden did talk about bringing supply chains home. He brought the CHIPS bill. We did a very bad job of communicating on that. So I think we Democrats have a challenge to communicate on all the issues that we're working on. As for Republicans, they think they're doing the right stuff. You know the Republicans in Michigan as well as I do. And I suspect that many of them are talking to people that are very strong Trump supporters. And, there was more than 40% of the people that liked what Donald Trump said last night.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to the Republican side of the aisle. We're joined by Congressman Tom Barrett. Welcome.
Zoe, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
First, Congressman, just give us your thumbnail reaction to the president's speech.
Yeah, I think the president laid out in his own way, his vision for America, the accomplishments that he's achieved in these last, several weeks that he's been, our new president. And really, I think the most marked improvement we've seen is certainly securing our southern border and the dramatic and substantial decline in attempted illegal border crossings, the enforcement action that we've taken in Congress, the Lake and Riley Act that we sent to his desk as his very first piece of legislation that he signed. Candidly, I was disappointed looking across the chamber, and the Democrats are sitting on their hands when Lake and Riley's family is recognized up in the balcony. They're sitting on their hands when that young man who was ceremonially inducted into the Secret Service was recognized, a cancer survivor. They really, I thought, showed some just bad manners in that regard. I'm looking forward to hopefully moving the country forward in the best way we can and working with everyone in that effort. But it would have been nice to have a little bit of camaraderie with our colleagues last night.
Yeah, and that was the Democrats. But what did you make of the president's tone last night? I mean, there was definitely some combative moments.
There were, and I think that, the president, look, the American people voted for Donald Trump knowing his disposition and the way he goes about, his way of achieving the policy outcomes that he's trying to undertake. And I think they voted for him with full knowledge of that. And, the Democrats really instigated, as you saw at the beginning of his speech, just a very obvious attempt to be disruptive and everything else that was going on. It was a clear attempt for attention seeking, and none of that was spontaneous. It was all very planned. And that's disappointing to see. I don't think the American people expect their policymakers to come to Washington, D.C. and purposefully conduct themselves in that manner to try and instigate a situation where they're being removed from the chamber during the president's remarks.
Well, let's turn to some policy where there certainly are some disagreements, as you've alluded to. Let's talk tariffs and the impact that, many business leaders, some, lawmakers and economists are saying will have on Michigan's economy in particular. I don't need to tell you about the relationship between Michigan and Canada. Some 25% of all goods, go between Detroit and Windsor, between the two countries. That businesses, right, the economy likes stability, likes reliability. This tariff decision is not that.
Well, we're continuing to monitor that, of course, and there's continuing to be negotiations that take place between the countries involved. But I think that tariffs can be used candidly as a point of leverage for some of these negotiations. And the president is not wrong that we've had far too many fentanyl deaths in our country. We've had trafficking of illicit drugs coming across our border, mostly through the southern border, but also in large numbers now through the northern border as well. We've had enough fentanyl coming into the country across the northern border to devastate entire populations of people. This is a absolutely devastating outcome that has affected every single community, not just communities in my district and not just communities that border that border Canada or border Mexico. This is affecting every single community in our country. And the president articulated as he campaigned that he was very serious about making progress on eliminating this threat. And he's doing what he feels is appropriate to do that. Look, we want to make sure that we are respecting the point of view of our economic stakeholders, those that are in these high need and movement of goods across the border and things that occur that way. And I think the president is negotiating outcomes that will both protect the economy and protect the lives of Americans through the flow of drugs and illicit contraband coming across our border. And we have to take it seriously. The other thing I'll say is at the end of the day, the president campaigned to on bringing more jobs back to America. And that's what he is trying to move toward.
And you just said these are policies that affect every community. And you know the saying that when the country catches a cold, Michigan catches the flu. We have a more acute response to these sorts of things. So when we look at these policies, well, are they a scalpel or are they a club?
Well, I'll to your point, I'll point out, of course, too, that, Michigan has had manufacturing jobs hollowed out over decades and generations of policies that have offshored manufacturing jobs to other countries, mostly or much of that due to trade policies that have gone to low wage and low skilled, workers in other countries that have been at the expense of Michigan manufacturing jobs. So, if you want to look at economic outcomes and economic realities, you can look at trade policy as one component of that. You also have to look at it through a national security lens too, which is to bear in mind that in the event that we have a national security threat, if America is called on to go to war, what type of capability are we going to have domestically to ensure our reaction and ensure our survival? During World War II, we had the arsenal of democracy that allowed America to really drive the effort to win the world, to win that conflict, to win the war in World War II. And I'm not convinced today that we would have the same capability of manufacturing and onshoring to have that resiliency. So it is a total factor consideration that we have to look at.
Congressman Barrett, you are a veteran. Let's turn to this letter that you recently sent to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs about the cuts being made to the VA and, U.S. veterans being fired, being laid off. What prompted you to write this letter?
Yeah, well, I, like a lot of other, Americans, saw a lot of the, progression that was going on with some of these federal workforce reductions and layoffs. And, in particular, so number one, I serve on the Veteran Affairs Committee here in Washington, D.C. I'm very proud and thankful of that. I also chair the Modernization and Technology Subcommittee for the VA. So I serve on one of these committees of jurisdiction over the Department of Veteran Affairs. So I'm just taking more of an interest in what's going on specifically at the VA. And there were a number of folks that were, certainly laid off because of their seniority or their probationary status or the time under which they had been hired. A number of veterans who had come off of active duty and gone to work at the VA to continue their service to our country and continue their service to other veterans. And, we all have a lot of respect for people that do that. And I will say this, the VA has certainly a tremendous amount of bureaucracy inherent within it. The VA is 470 or 480,000 employees across the country, one of the largest bureaucracies that we have in the entire federal government. There's bureaucracy in there, and there's efforts that need to be done. And I support the efforts to have appropriate accountability within the VA. It's just simply my ask that we do that on a merit basis and not simply based upon when a person was hired. If they were hired less than a year ago and they're still within a probationary window, versus people who are not performing to the expectations that we have. And that's why I wrote the letter to the secretary. And it's just my hope that we can be a little bit more mindful of those things as we're going about the business of restoring accountability within our federal government.
I heard you use the word mindful, right? And we're talking about the VA. I'm curious, are you feeling that same sense as you see cuts and layoffs happening in other departments as well?
Well, I think that there's a lot of reasons why we can, look at resculpting our federal workforce to best meet the needs and demands and expectations, candidly, of the taxpayers that are ultimately paying for these departments. And many of them have grown substantially larger as time has gone on. There's been a migration or a tendency to grow these departments and grow their portfolio of issues and things that they do and work on. It's not that I don't believe the VA needs accountability or that we ought to rethink some of the way in which the VA has done things. There's plenty of reasons and culpability to point out within the VA, and veterans have been frustrated with the department for quite a long time, and Congress has been frustrated too. And again, I just think that there's an approach to do that is merit-based and allows us to continue the mission of serving our veterans.
So did you get a response, or do you think your concerns are being heard by the administration?
I do. I do believe that our concerns are being heard, and we've seen a revision to some of that memo that allows more discretion within the different departments. And I know that the secretary has worked on shielding some specific areas within the VA from any of these layoffs that have taken place, and and I'm continuing to have those conversations with the administration and with my committee members on the VA committee.
Are you at all concerned about voicing these concerns in opposition to, one of your party leaders' key initiatives?
I'm very mindful that I ultimately answer to the people of the 7th Congressional District that sent me here. And I think candor is often the best approach. And it's not that I don't respect the work that is being done to right-size our government, root out inefficiencies, things that we need to do better. As I said, I think that as we go about that, we have to do it in a mindful way and look at the merit basis of who's being retained and who's being let go. You could have someone who's an underperforming employee who's been there quite a long time, and you could have someone who's a high-performing employee who's been there 6 months. And I don't think there's any necessarily a correlation between the length of time that you've been working at a particular agency and the type of job that you've performed. And of course, as it relates to the VA, you can certainly acknowledge that we've had an underperformance of expectations, to put it as gently as I can. I also, I did work on accountability within the State Department of Veteran Affairs when I was in the state legislature. And it's always been my practice that when I see something that I think is being done in a way that affects our veterans, I really take it seriously, that it's part of my job here and part of the voice that I have to elevate that in the way that I think is the best for our veteran population.
That's Michigan Congressman Tom Barrett, who was in attendance last night at President Donald Trump's first address to a joint session of Congress in his second term. Congressman Barrett, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And that is It's Just Politics for today. A reminder, sign up for the new It's Just Politics newsletter. It hits your inbox every Friday, the latest in all things Michigan politics. Sign up at the website michiganpublic.org. I am Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.